I recently watched the Before trilogy for the first time, and instantly fell in love with it. It's one of those things I've always been aware of for a long time, but never got around to watching it. But now that I have, I could kick myself for not having seen it sooner. I hadn't known too much about the trilogy beforehand, only that it was a love story told in 3 parts, and that it ruined people. And when I finally sat down to watch all 3 of them, I came away from the trilogy in complete awe of it. I think there are very few cinematic experiences out there like this trilogy, and sometimes I can't believe it exists. Some light spoilers about the trilogy will follow, so please be warned. If you haven't seen it, I cannot yell at you enough to do so. The Before trilogy consists of, you guessed it, 3 movies titled Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. Each subsequent installment was released around 9 years after the previous one, with Before Sunrise releasing in 1995, Before Sunset in 2004, and Before Midnight in 2013. The movies star Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy as Jesse and Céline. Jesse is an American visiting Europe for the summer, and Céline is a French student returning home before the start of term. The two meet on a train bound for Paris, and after having an illuminating conversation where sparks fly, Jesse convinces Céline to get off the train with him in Vienna, where they can spend the whole night together before he has to fly back to the States the following morning, and Céline has to go on to Paris. They spend an amazing night together, and just before they have to leave each other, they agree to meet again on the train platform in 6 months. The next 2 movies take place 9 and 18 years after Before Sunrise, and show what ends up happening to the 2 of them and their romance. These movies are incredibly simple, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love them so much. The entirety of the Before trilogy consists of long conversations between Jesse and Céline. I'm talking about scenes that are upwards of 10-15 minutes long that are just about Jesse and Céline talking, and it is riveting. We watch as these 2 get to know each other by expressing their thoughts, feelings, pasts, futures, outlooks, philosophies, all things that would normally take months, if not years, for 2 people to learn about each other, and it is so magical to watch Jesse and Céline do it over the course of a single night. By the end of Before Sunrise, Jesse and Céline seem like people who have known each other for a lifetime. The conversations are so intimate and real, and watching them makes you realize what true conversation is. None of their conversations really end. They don't explore any one topic until they've exhausted it, but rather move from topic to topic as each adds to the thoughts of the other with their own perspective. Conversation morphs and expands, and you get from point A to B to C as smoothly as water flowing through a river. And even better is that none of it is boring. Before Sunrise and Before Sunset and Before Midnight, for that matter, never loses the audience's attention. It would have been so easy to get this wrong, to linger on one topic for a moment too long, or move to a topic that falls flat. So the fact that I was engrossed in them and their conversations from the moment they started talking to the moment they ended in each film speaks volumes. You listen to these 2 talk for hours and hours, but it feels like you could go on listening for hours more. Before Sunset sees Jesse and Céline reunite in Paris, where they easily fall back into the same comfort they shared in Vienna. Even though it's been 9 years, it feels like it's been a day. They're able to pick up right where they left off and do what they did in Vienna all those years ago. Except this time, they have more life experience, more perspectives, and they've changed in certain ways. Now, their conversations are not just about who they are, but who they've been in the 9 years they spent apart. In Before Midnight, we see that they continue to have the same kinds of illuminating conversations, and that even after all these years, they're still telling each other new stories and learning about each other. And goddammit, it's so good that it makes me want to scream. A huge reason why these movies can survive on being pure conversation is because of the leads, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. These two are so good, it actually hurts a little. You watch them talk to each other, or simply even be around each other, and you feel like you're watching two people who know each other intimately. They have such a natural rapport. They're able to talk about deep things and seem so enraptured by each other, but they're also able to make jokes and riff off each other in a way that seems so comfortable. Everything from their speech to their physicality oozes an easy chemistry without which these movies would not have been successful. There are tiny things that they do that speak so loudly. In Before Sunrise, while Jessie and Celine are on a streetcar, Jessie goes to brush Celine's hair out of her face, but she turns to him at the last second and he pulls back, flustered. There's a moment in Before Sunset that mirrors this one, when Jessie and Celine are talking in a car and Celine reaches to run a hand through Jessie's hair but pulls back, unsure if she should. There's the dinner scene in Before Midnight when Jessie pulls Celine in to kiss her because he's so overcome with how much he loves her. In Before Sunrise, Celine pulls Jessie's arm around her as they're walking, and in Before Sunset, Jessie pulls Celine onto a bench with him when she tells him to imagine this being their last night alive. And in Before Midnight, the tiny shoulder kisses Jessie gives Celine in the church are so tender and full of love. In fact, that's the overarching idea that I can say about this trilogy. Every action in these movies, whether big, like kissing for the first time at sunset, or small, like wanting to simply touch the other person, is full of love. You can see it just by watching these two exist next to each other. Like during that listening booth scene. That goddamn listening booth. Even if you've never seen these movies, I can almost guarantee that you've seen parts of this scene from Before Sunrise, where Jessie and Celine put on a record in a listening booth, and we watch them fidget as they stand so close to each other and steal glances at each other when the other isn't looking. But you can tell each has a feeling the other is looking but doesn't say anything. It is the perfect representation of what the beginning of a crush feels like. God damn it, this scene invented Kilig. If you don't know, I explained the concept of Kilig in my video on The Last of Us, but if you haven't seen it, Kilig is a Tagalog word my best friend taught me that means excitement stemming from a romantic experience. It's the sweetest word in the world, and this scene is exactly that. When I tell you that I was beside myself watching this scene, I am not exaggerating. Watching this scene is almost painful. That's how sweet it is. This scene is also mirrored in Before Sunset. Near the end of the movie, Celine invites Jessie up to her apartment for tea, and we are treated to these two walking up flights of stairs in silence, stealing glances at each other when the other isn't looking. But it's different this time. If Before Sunrise depicted the early excited feelings of a crush, this scene in Before Sunset depicts that sweetness of anticipation. It's like these two are sharing a secret that only they know, which is confirmed by the end of the movie. Listen. The last lines of Before Sunset are some of the most sick and twisted bits of writing I have ever encountered, and I mean that in the best way possible. I am giving Richard Linklater, Kim Crazen, Ethan Hawke, and Julie Delpy the highest praise possible, because that shit had me screaming in my house at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night.
Baby, you are gonna miss that plane.
I know.
This is so sick and fucking twisted! Sick and twisted!
In fact, I think Before Sunset is my favorite of the series. From beginning to end, it's brimming with anticipation as Jessie and Celine learn the people each has become in the 9 years since Vienna, reminisce on what they had, and wonder what might have been if everything had gone to plan and they hadn't lost the time they did. And at the shortest runtime of the series, it pumps every minute with intimacy and longing and edge-of-seat anticipation, which it only relieves in the literal final moments. It's actually so sick, like it made me ill, and I love it. Though Before Sunset is my favorite, each movie offers enough within itself to stand on its own. I feel like, in theory, you could watch any installment without seeing the others and still take away something important, whether that's to embrace opportunity and love, or to not let special connections slip away from you, or to communicate with your partner and resolve issues together. Each movie works on its own, but when consumed as a trilogy, you get this full picture of two people's lives, and you can consolidate all the lessons each movie is trying to convey to learn fully about love. How it starts, how it changes, how it expands, and maybe more importantly, how to recognize it, how to cultivate it, and how to protect it. With each movie, you can see Jesse and Celine grow and change, and recognize how they bring their individual experiences and perspectives to their relationship. I think it's such a feat for the filmmakers to be able to return to these characters after almost a decade, and write them as easily as if it had barely been a day. There requires a deep understanding of these characters to be able to do so. And I mean, watching the final product is proof that there was a deep love and understanding here. It's equally as impressive for Hawk and Delpy to be able to return to these characters and fall into them just like that, and to still have the same chemistry together 20 years later as they did in 1994. When I think about this series, I am in awe that it was successfully made. Hollywood is fickle. So many ideas die. Actors have scheduling conflicts, studios mess up plans, writers and actors go on strike against those studios to fight for livable wages, as they should. There's so much that could have prevented this trilogy from being made, so the fact that all three movies were made successfully over a period of 20 years and with such consistent quality is just unique and magical to me. I want to end off by discussing Before Midnight, in particular the argument that occurs in the third act. This scene is not fun. At all. After 2.5 movies of watching Jesse and Celine be so sickeningly in love, watching them have a big blowout argument, which was being set up throughout the first acts of the movie, is painful. It's kind of like watching your own parents fight. You're tense and uncomfortable the whole time, and you just want it to end and have the two of them make up. And the movie is kind of evil with this too, because there are 2 instances throughout that it seems like the argument is ending and that Jesse and Celine are going to be amicable again. But then, someone says something wrong, and it adds more fuel to the fire. It feels awful, and I have to hand it to them because it only feels that way because of how successfully they built up the intense bond Jesse and Celine share with each other, and what the audience shares with them after watching 2.5 movies about them. In the end, though, Jesse and Celine are able to make up using the signature charm that these characters are known for. But the issues they were arguing over aren't resolved, and you get the feeling that they're going to have to continue talking about it. But it's still a relatively happy ending, just in a different way than we saw with Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. Much of this trilogy feels like a fairy tale. I mean, 2 people meet in Europe while on vacation and have a whirlwind romance over the course of a single night. 9 years later, they reunite in Paris against all odds and begin the relationship they always wanted to have. It's magical. It's a dreamlike experience of love, which is shown even in the movies themselves with Jesse's novels, where he romanticizes these experiences and fictionalizes a version of their story to live in a perfect romantic place forever. But Before Midnight takes that fairy tale and grounds it in reality. It shows what long-term love really is.
If you want true love, then this is it. This is real life. It's not perfect, but it's real. And if you can't see it, then you're blind, all right? I give up.
Before Midnight doesn't end in a dreamlike place like the other 2 did. You don't leave this movie with hope fluttering in your chest that 2 young people can keep their whirlwind romance alive, or with a rush of catharsis that 2 people who are meant for each other will finally be together. You don't leave Before Midnight in a fairy tale. You leave Before Midnight still in the real world, which is very purposeful. Jesse and Celine's relationship isn't perfect. No relationship is. But the fact that they're still sitting there next to each other, still telling each other stories, still making each other laugh, is a reassurance that they will be okay, because they love each other, and they will each do the work to make it last. In an interview with The Guardian regarding the trilogy, Ethan Hawke said that the first film is what could be, the second is about what should have been. Before Midnight is about what it is. I love this perspective on the series. You can really see that he's right. Over 20 years, Jesse and Celine take us through their romantic fantasy and end it with reality. They show us the beauty of what new love is like for young people and what long-term love ends up being. It's not always happy and easy. It's not always kissing at sunset and in churches, or walks through Paris, or Nina Simone impressions, or long drives on vacations, or singing songs in your apartment. It can be hard, but in the end, it'll be all right, as long as you're willing to try.